For the last month, I have been going back and forth about whether to do this episode. The events that have transpired in the last, I guess, 6 months now, 8 months, sort of breaking with the Harvey Weinstein scandal, and now what has become ubiquitous. The events and the crisis associated with the Harvey Weinstein situation has now become ubiquitous in the political, in the financial, in the entertainment, and in the economic spheres. And I've been quite reticent. I've been thinking about doing an episode on this, and I was quite reticent about it because it's extraordinarily intense. It's raw, it's emotional, it's sexually emotional. It's really overwhelming. But after thinking about it quite seriously, I decided to do an episode on it. And I do an episode on it because this is something, and those of you who have not had courses with me or do not know me personally, this is something that we have actually been talking about in my lectures at UC Davis, at the University of Southern California, Santa Barbara, for 15 years at Cal State Northridge, and even in my courses at Anglo-American University in Prague. We've been talking about this, not so much in such an extraordinary way and a sort of socially intense way, but we've been talking about these themes now for 20 years. So the themes are in my mind, and they have been for quite a while. In fact, I'm quite surprised that it took this long for this event, the series of events and the crisis that has been set into motion by the Harvey Weinstein situation. I'm quite surprised that it has taken this long to happen, because these themes that have produced and that have energized and animated the events surrounding the Weinstein crisis and the crisis of material and sexual assault and domination in American culture, these themes have been floating around for 500 years in quite a powerful, deep, powerful subconscious way. So now it's time to discuss, as we will say, today's topic. And the title for today's show: Boethius, Machiavelli, and Lady Fortuna. One account of the modern origins of material and sexual assault. So, our story begins with Boethius, and Boethius's notion of happiness, false happiness, and Lady Fortuna. Now, I realize this might seem like a very odd place to begin a very intense discussion about the modern origins of material and sexual assault. But this is actually one place in which it begins. And I begin with Boethius not only to identify an alternative conception of happiness, false happiness, and the human relationship to Lady Fortuna. I do it to sort of illuminate that, but also to provide a sort of sharp relief and sort of juxtaposition to how Machiavelli will transform these fundamental concepts, and in transforming these fundamental concepts, make way for what we call the modern era, and actually prepare the foundations for 500 years of material and sexual assault. So our story begins with Boethius, and specifically it begins with Boethius's extraordinarily important book, The Consolation of Philosophy. If you have not read at least the first 3 chapters of Boethius's Consolation of Philosophy, I encourage you to purchase a copy and read it. It will enhance, if not save, your life. So I will begin there. And by the way, Boethius was writing in around 525 AD. He's a late Roman Stoic, educated at Plato's Lyceum. And he is actually, Boethius is actually the most important person no one's ever heard of. And in 525 AD, he writes this book called The Consolation of philosophy. By the way, in the weeks before he was executed unjustly. So it's the context of the book, the wisdom of the book, all very powerful. So the story begins with Boethius's account of happiness, false happiness, and Lady Fortuna. Now, I'm going to give you just a brief treatment of those ideas because I want to, one, just identify them and then use them as a sharp relief against how Machiavelli transforms these terms. Now, if you want a complete version of Boethius's philosophy of happiness, Boethius's philosophy of false happiness, we did a podcast on this, an entire podcast dedicated to this theme, and it's on the website, and it was published November 22nd, just 1 year ago, 2016. So if you want the backstory about all of this, it's there on the DSU website, excuse me. So let me just identify some critical Boethian themes, and then we will get into really what Machiavelli does with them. So for Boethius, happiness is a type of peace of mind. It's a type of contentment that is based on one's knowledge that one has lived well because one has spent one's life through philosophy or theology, acquiring knowledge of moral virtue. So happiness is a sort of peace of mind and a contentment. And it's also connected to what Boethius will call self-sufficiency, that you are able to do what you need to do and pursue the things you need to do in your mind, driven by your own resources and your own intellectual power and capacity. So happiness for Boethius is a type of contentment that is derived from knowledge that one has lived well. It is based on a sort of self-sufficiency, and it's informed by very little or no wants. So happiness in the Stoic sense is a type of self-sufficiency with little or no wants, and knowledge that one has lived well, one has lived morally. Now, more importantly to that, I want to discuss Boethius's notion of Lady Fortuna and what Boethius thinks false happiness is. Now, to modern listeners, to modern people, talk about Lady Fortuna. It sounds comical. It sounds archaic. It kind of sounds comical. Who talks about Lady Fortuna? Well, Lady Fortuna played a very powerful role in the Greek, in the Roman humanist, in the Roman Stoic world, in the classical world. Lady Fortuna was the mythos and the symbolism of Lady Fortuna was extraordinarily powerful, and she plays a significant role in Stoic philosophy and Boethius' overall philosophy. So it's very important that we talk about her. And as we will see in a few minutes, Machiavelli's fundamental transformation of the Stoic account of Lady Fortuna prepares the conditions of possibility for what will become our crisis. So it's really important to get a sense of what's going on here with these ideas and the role they play. So the first thing to know about Boethius' notion of Lady Fortuna, and by the way, this is the mythological origin of the Wheel of Fortune game show. If you watched Vanna White and they spin the wheel and all the little things come up, some good, some bad, the Stoic notion of Lady Fortuna, Boethius' notion of Lady Fortuna is the origin, the mythos origin for the game show. So a little pop culture reference, political philosophy and pop culture. All right. So there are three or four really critical things to know about Boethius' account of Lady Fortuna. First, Lady Fortuna is a goddess, and she's a cosmic force. She's a woman, she's a goddess, and she's a cosmic force. She's a feminine goddess, she's a feminine force, and she's out there in the cosmos, out there somewhere in the cosmos, and she's spinning a wheel. Literally, this is where the Wheel of Fortune sort of idea comes from. She's out there spinning a wheel. And in fact, she's not just spinning a wheel. The way the mythos operates, everybody, according to Stoicism and according to different versions of the Lady Fortuna mythology, everybody has a wheel. All human beings have a wheel. I have a wheel. Brett Walston has a wheel. Nicholas Marr has a wheel. Georgia Kataris has a wheel. Eric Blight has a wheel. Emma all these beautiful names that I see in the chat, you all have wheels. We all have a wheel. And Lady Fortuna, she's out there in the cosmos. She's a woman, and she's spinning our wheels, right? And all the little sections on the wheel, just like in the game show, they all have little attributes. Some are very good, some are very painful, some are very tragic. And so the wheel, we all have a wheel, and all the various sections on the wheel symbolize all the good and bad things that can happen to us. Right, so we fall in love, we get our dream job, or we're skiing and we break a leg. That's bad fortune. You know, good fortune, the good things that come, bad fortune, the bad things. And the key about the Stoic notion of Lady Fortuna is she's out there and she's spinning the wheel, and she's spinning our wheel. Now, what's important to know about the fact that we have wheels and the good and bad things that come to us are a result of how the wheel stops at any given time. She's out there, everybody has their wheel, and all the events and the moments, the good things or the bad things are a result of where the wheel lands. Now, again, here's the three critical things to really know about Boethius' notion of Lady Fortuna. First, the spinning of the wheel and where it lands is totally random, right? Lady Fortuna, she's out there in the cosmos, and she's spinning Nick Dungy's wheel, and the wheel goes around, and maybe today it stops on good luck, good fortune. Maybe tomorrow something happens with someone I love, with my own health, and it's bad fortune. And the important thing to remember here is that where it lands is random, right? Lady Fortuna is in no way rigging where the wheel lands. Where the wheel lands, where it stops, is totally random. Now, these two are directly related. It's not just that where the wheel stops is random, it's also equally as important. Lady Fortuna is indifferent to individual human beings. So it's not just that where the wheel lands is random, for good or for bad, but Lady Fortuna is indifferent to us. She's indifferent to individual human beings. She's indifferent to the prayers or the pleas from individual human beings. Lady Fortuna plays no favorites, right? She doesn't hear our prayers for good fortune. She's not moved by our suffering by bad fortune. She's indifferent. She's a cosmic force. She's spinning the wheel. Where it lands is random. And at the end of the day, she can't hear. She's indifferent too. She's deaf and blind to our prayers and our suffering. So she can't be reached. She's untouchable. She's beyond human influence. Now, the third part, and all three of these are equally important. The third critical thing to know about Boethius' account of Lady Fortuna is everything in life that human beings tend to believe belong to them, and all of the things in life that human beings tend to want and tend to pursue, all of those things belong to Lady Fortuna. Wealth, physical health, the family you're born into, the conditions of possibility you are born into, one's athletic ability, one's intelligence, right? All of the things that we tend to associate with ours. This is my genius. This is my beauty. This is my wealth. This is my aristocratic family, right? All those things that we tend to associate as ours, and all the things human beings spend an extraordinary amount of time chasing. We're chasing the power. We're chasing the wealth. We're chasing the fame. We're chasing the sexual conquest and glory, right? All those things that we think are ours, all those things that we think we are chasing, and all those things we're chasing because we think they'll make us happy. All of those things are what Boethius calls false happiness, right? Everything belongs to Lady Fortuna, okay? And so the things we think are ours, the things we are chasing, especially the things we are chasing that think will make us happy: power, wealth, beauty, sexual conquest, fame, glory, influence, right? All those things that we think will make us happy, those things actually belong to Lady Fortuna. And this is, and by the way, this is one of the deep insights of Stoic wisdom. This is an extraordinarily powerful observation, and it might very well be essential to getting clear about who one is and what one wants in the world. And so, okay, so things like beauty and wealth and political power and fame and sexual conquest and gratification, all those things that people think they want and that people think will make them happy, are for Boethius false happiness. Now, why are they false happiness? Just a few points, and then we're going to get on to the Machiavellian situation. First, like I said, power, wealth, beauty, fame, erotic, pleasure, those are technically what Boethius calls false happiness. Now, why are they false? One, they're false because, as I said a moment ago, they belong to Lady Fortuna. All of these things are technically on loan from Lady Fortuna to us. She gives them to us, and she can take them away, right? And there's some deep wisdom here, right? No one chooses where they are born. No one chooses the family they are born. No one chooses whether they are healthy or unhealthy. No one chooses whether they are born in the conditions of affluence and opportunity or extraordinarily heartbreaking, tragic situations. So no one chooses these things. And it's not just that no one chooses these things in the original situation, but also as one goes through life, one of the things that we learn as we go through life is many of the things that we want and that we crave and we seek, whether it's wealth or whether it's beauty or whether it's fame, all of these things are very ephemeral. They don't last, and often they leave when we don't expect, and once they leave, there's nothing we can do about it. So these things are false because they're not ours. They technically don't belong to us. First of all, they belong to Lady Fortuna. And two, as I was just segueing into, it's not just that they don't belong to us, but they're false because we don't control their coming and going, right? They are gifts to us. If you have the gift of wealth or fame or a good family, or maybe you were born with athletic ability so you can play for the Yankees, right? All of that's it's a gift, and it will pass. It will sort of fade away. It will pass. An injury can destroy a career. Illness can destroy a career. All sorts of things. Age, destroys a career. And so these things that we think are ours, that belong to us, that we think make us happy, or to which our happiness is attached, one, they're not ours, and they go. And when they go, there's nothing we can do about them. And trying to do something about them and screaming and raging at the wind to try to do something about the fact that they're going is actually a source of extraordinary human suffering. That's another show. And so the third reason these things are false happiness is because not only do they belong to Lady Fortuna, not only do they come and go as she says, because she's spinning the wheel, we don't control it. And three, also, again, fascinating observation here, these things depend on other people for their fulfillment. So if I desire fame as something I want to be happy, it requires that people love me. It requires that people watch my films. It requires that they buy my magazines, that they buy my records, they buy my pictures. If I want fame, and I think fame is going to make me happy, that depends on other people. It depends on other people giving to me that sort of accreditation and that valuation. It's same with power. If I have political power, especially in modern liberal democracies, it requires that other people vote for me. I have to be dependent on people saying, yes, I'm going to vote. Here's my consent to your power. If I want wealth, it requires people to buy my products, buy my content, buy the products, buy the shoes, buy the clothes. So all of the things that we tend to think that are ours, that we want in order to bring us happiness, they actually derive from other people. We require other people to give them to us. And in doing this, that increases our dependency on other people, which, by the way, is a dangerous thing for Boethius, because the greater your dependency on things that aren't yours and people you can't control the coming and going, the potentially the greater your suffering, your sadness, your unhappiness is going to be. So that's the argument, the really brief argument for Boethius, right? For Boethius, Lady Fortuna is a cosmic force. She's a woman. She's a feminine force. She's a cosmic force. She's out there in the cosmos. She's spinning your wheel. Where the wheel lands is totally random. She plays no favorites, and everything that's on the wheel, the good things and the bad things, but especially the good things, they belong to her. When she says you can have them, you have them. When she takes them away, she takes them away. And there's nothing you can do about it. No amount of screaming out the wind will alter that. So, for Boethius, false happiness are things like wealth, political power, fame, beauty, and erotic and sexual conquest. All of those things are forms of false happiness. One, because they don't belong to you. Two, you can't control when you have them and when you don't have them. And three, they increase your dependency on other people and therefore make you vulnerable, right? So Boethius says, look, don't connect your happiness to these things, right? Connect your happiness to an internal sense of self-sufficiency and a sort of sense of contentment with little ones. And that way you're not pushed around by the blows of fate. Now, why is false happiness so seductive? This is the last thing we'll say when we move on to Machiavelli. Why is false happiness so seductive? False happiness is so seductive because human beings improperly think that if they could only acquire just enough, if they could only acquire more or just enough of power, of wealth, of physical beauty, of fame, of glory, if they could just acquire enough of these things, then they would be happy, and more importantly, they would achieve some self-sufficiency. Human beings improperly think that acquiring more and more wealth and fame and power and influence will somehow make them self-sufficient, right? But in fact, the opposite happens, and it makes them more dependent. All right, so enough for Boethius. Now, I spent a little bit of time setting that up, so we can now turn to Machiavelli, and we can now turn to the way Machiavelli transforms the classical and the Stoic account of happiness and the human, especially the male relationship to Lady Fortuna. So here we go. Now we begin the critical element of our discussion today. So let's move to Machiavelli and let's move to the Prince. Now, let me just say as a sort of statement introduction, Machiavelli makes possible the modern world by fundamentally destroying the classical, the Boethian, the Stoic understanding of human happiness, and especially the human relationship, especially the male relationship towards Lady Fortuna. Okay? Critical. Let me repeat it. Just kind of let it sink in and get your head around it, because this alters world history, and it is the conditions of possibility for the crisis now unfolding in all elements of American entertainment, political, finance, and sort of social culture. Machiavelli makes possible the modern world. Machiavelli invents the modern world by fundamentally destroying the classical world, the Boethian world, the Stoic conception, by destroying Boethius's conception of human happiness, and especially of altering the human relationship, especially the male relationship to Lady Fortuna. Machiavelli fundamentally begins the modern era by redefining human happiness and our relationship to Lady Fortuna. So this is the moment where modern history, the modern epic is invented, and this is the moment where world history arcs in a fundamentally different way. We are now living the consequences of this moment. So why did Machiavelli do this? Why did Machiavelli reject the Stoic and the Platonic and the Christian notion of happiness, and why did he reject the Greek and the Stoic conception of the human relationship to Lady Fortuna? Why? What's the critical moment here? Machiavelli is very suspicious in his heart of his hearts. He'll never admit it. You'll never see it in his writing. But deep in his heart, Machiavelli is suspicious of the Greek and the Stoic philosophical conception of truth, and he's very sort of suspicious of the Christian or the theological notion of God. And suffused through Machiavelli's writings, especially in The Prince, is this: if Plato's pure ideas of justice and friendship and piety and courage, if Plato's pure ideas of those essential concepts, and if the Christian conception of God do not exist, or if those things aren't really accessible by the human mind and the human soul, then happiness as Socrates knew it, happiness as Boethius knew it, the well-lived life as the Christians conceive it, those things aren't possible. If Plato's pure ideas don't exist, if God doesn't exist, then happiness as the classical world understood it, the purpose of life as the classical philosophical and theological world understood it, doesn't exist. Happiness can't be based on moral virtue or a certain sort of Christian alignment with one's soul, with the Word of God. If those things don't exist, happiness can't be that. And so Machiavelli sort of sets in motion the modern era by saying this: the universe and the world are anarchic, and human beings are not inherently good, right? And these two observations alter forever human history in the modern West. Again, Machiavelli comes on the scene and he says two things: the universe and the world are anarchic, and human beings are not inherently good. And any student in a college IR class knows what this is: anarchy, arche, A-R-C-H-E. Arche is Greek for order, right? And in the classical world, whether it was Platonic geometry or Christian theology, the cosmos had an order. We didn't always see it. We couldn't always read it. Sometimes it looked disordered. But if you are committed to an Aristotelian or Platonic or Stoic philosophy, or you're in some way committed to a Christian theology, even though you can't see the order, and often the world looks disordered, there is order. There's a geometry behind it. There's a telos behind it. There's a plan, perhaps a God's plan. So in the classical world, the cosmos had arche. Machiavelli says the cosmos in the world has no arche, has no order. It's anarchic. It is in constant motion. It is unstable, right? It is violent. And a lot of the things that happen in the world are threatening to human life. In addition, he says, not only is the cosmos and the world anarchic, human beings aren't inherently good. They aren't inherently good because reason isn't what Plato taught. And they aren't inherently good because the soul may not exist. So this sets up one of the most profound moments in human history. Machiavelli says, well, okay, now what do we do? If the world is chaotic, if it's anarchic, and if human beings aren't morally or inherently good, what drives human beings? What characterizes human behavior? If the world's anarchic, how do people act? And if people aren't inherently or morally good, what the hell drives them? What do they want? And at the end of chapter 3 in Machiavelli's Prince, he says, in the most extraordinary way, 2 or 3 lines that will become the defining theme of all modern human life and all modern human, social, and political and economic activity. It's extraordinary. 3/4 of the way towards the end of chapter 3 in The Prince, Machiavelli says, and he's talking to Lorenzo de Medici, right? He's talking to this rare, unique, aristocratic, powerful, ambitious, virile young Italian man, this would-be conqueror, this would-be prince. He's talking to Lorenzo de Medici, and he says to him, he says, in an anarchic world, in the absence of God, in the absence of justice, he says, what the fuck do people want? And he says to Lorenzo, he says, and by the way, it's extraordinary how these two sentences have not only defined the modern epic, but it is a perfect description of our lives now. It is a perfect description of our lives now. And here's the quote, Machiavelli. He's whispering into the ear of Lorenzo de Medici. He's whispering in the ear of Harvey Weinstein. He's whispering into the ear of Bill Clinton. He's whispering into the ear of Kevin Spacey. He's whispering into the ear of Bill Cosby. He's whispering into the ear. He's whispering into the ear of these powerful, rare, ambitious, aggressive, acquisitive, powerful, virile men. He's whispering. It is a natural and ordinary thing to want to acquire, he says, and always. And he says, the men who desire to acquire and are successful, they will be celebrated, they will be praised. But for those men who desire to acquire but fail, they will be praised, they will be blamed, they will be rejected. Okay, extraordinarily poetic, transformative of world history. The world is anarchic. Happiness isn't moral virtue. The hell do you do? How do you act in this anarchic world? And now what do human beings want? Human beings don't want moral virtue anymore. They don't want knowledge of God. What do they want? They want to acquire. They want to acquire. Acquisition becomes the dominant theme of 500, 600, 700 years of modern economics and power and politics and entertainment. Human beings want to acquire. And Machiavelli says again, he's whispering into the ear of Harvey Weinstein, it is a natural and ordinary thing to want to acquire. And Machiavelli sort of gets modern capitalism going, because Machiavelli didn't say, it's an ordinary and natural thing to want to acquire once, and then you're okay. No. Capitalism works not just because it's natural and ordinary that we want to acquire, but we want to acquire always. That the desire for acquisition is ongoing, it's unending. It's the raw, vital energy that drives the mind and drives the blood. Machiavelli's whispering into Harvey Weinstein's ear. It's natural and ordinary that one wants to acquire. And always. And powerful, virile, ambitious, risk-taking men that do it, they will be praised. And those that try and fail, they will be blamed. It's extraordinary the way that perfectly describes our late modern, hyper-capitalistic, anxious lifestyle right now. Now let's step back. Okay. Now, what is it that they want to acquire? What is it that human beings want to acquire, and especially powerful men? What is it that Lorenzo de Medici in the 1520s wants to acquire? What does Nick Dungy want to acquire? They want to acquire first all the things that Boethius called false happiness. Human beings want to acquire all the things that Boethius had labeled and titled as false happiness. We want the wealth. We want the land. We want the territory. We want the fame. We want the gold. We want the glory. For Machiavelli, the energy of life is acquisition. What do we want to acquire? We want to acquire wealth. We want to acquire beautiful things. We want to consume beautiful things. We want territory. We want fame, and ultimately we want glory. Modern life becomes the unending desire to acquire all the things Boethius has titled false happiness. Those are the things people want. And not just people, these are the things that the rare, unique, aristocratic, virile men desire. All right. Now it gets heavier. Hey, Nikolai. My friend from Prague. Nikolai, how are you? I'm going to see you in a couple of weeks. All right. So God is dead. The world is anarchic. Human beings desire to acquire the things that make them feel good, that elevate their sort of identity, that make them esteemed and craved by other human beings. All right. So what do you need to do that? If you're Lorenzo de Medici, if you're a would-be studio executive, if you're a would-be political operative, if you're a young Bill Clinton, if you're a young trader on the floor, if you're running the halls in a hedge fund, what do you need? What do you need? And Machiavelli continues the modern world by saying, what you need is power. Machiavelli opens modernity by declaring that humans, especially rare, aristocratic, bold, virile, ambitious men, what those men need is power. The anarchic world requires power to subdue, and the people in that world require power to subdue, and not just power to subdue, but power to get what you want, to extract what you want from the world and from other people and the bodies of other people. You need power. You need power. And you need to acquire and exercise and maintain power in such a certain way that you can achieve and acquire the things that make you happy. You can acquire the wealth, you can acquire the land, you can acquire the titles, you can acquire the influence, you can acquire the bodies of other human beings in the name of this endless sexual conquest. You need power. In order to acquire things and power, here it is, here it begins. Now the darkness begins. In order to acquire things and a certain type of power, Machiavelli argues in The Prince that you have to separate morality from power. In order to act in the way the world is, and in order to get what you want in the world, in order to do that effectively, you have to mentally, you have to psychologically, you have to emotionally separate morality from power. Machiavelli begins the modern world by arguing that effective rulers, effective executives of countries and hedge funds and entertainment firms and finance firms, in order to acquire the power you need and to run these firms and to get what you want, you have to separate morality from power. You don't have to be a good person to be a good executive. You don't have to be a good person to be a good ruler. In fact, Machiavelli says, the more moral you are, the more you are good in your heart, the greater the likelihood you will fail. Not only will you fail in the acquisition and the exercise of power, but you won't get what you want. And this is the origin of the sort of a pop culture saying, nice guys finish last. You don't have to be a good person to be an effective ruler. In fact, the better you are, the nicer you are, the more moral you are, sincerely, objectively, truly, the greater the likelihood that you will fail. Nice guys finish last, Machiavelli. It begins with Machiavelli. Or if it didn't begin with Machiavelli, Machiavelli certainly made it fashionable. In fact, Machiavelli goes one step further, and then we're going to get into it. Not only do you not have to be a good person to be an effective ruler, but you actually have to learn how and when to be bad. Not only do you have to separate morality from power in order to get what you want, you don't have to be a good person to get what you want. In fact, not only do you not have to be a good person, you actually have to learn to know when and how to be bad. Now, this is extraordinary. And it creates two problems for Machiavelli. Machiavelli argues you've got to separate morality from power in order to get what you want. You don't have to be a good person to be an effective ruler of a country or an entertainment firm or a hedge fund or a bank. You don't have to be a good person to be an effective ruler. And in fact, in order to be an effective ruler, you've got to learn how to be bad, when and how to be bad. Now, this creates an extraordinary problem for Machiavelli. He's just destroyed 2,000 years of Greek philosophy and Christian theology. Good 1,500 years. 1,500 years. And now he's got two problems. He's got two problems. First, he's got to invent, and this is a critical part of the story. First, he's got to invent a new archetype for this powerful person. Right? He's got to invent a new archetype. What's the model? What's the archetype for this person? And the second problem is, where do you go learn this? Where in the hell do you go and learn how to separate morality from power so you can get what you want? Right? Where do you go? What is this? Who is this person? And where do you go to learn this knowledge? And what is this knowledge? And by the way, and this is the whole point of today's show, what do you want with this knowledge? What's the purpose of this knowledge? All right. Two extraordinary things we've got to talk about. I'll talk about them quickly. In the classical world, in the Greek world, in the Christian world, right, where there was a kind of a fusion between morality and power, right? Plato's philosopher king, Socrates, Boethius, classic archetypes of the fusion between a type of morality and the acquisition and the exercise of power. In New Testament Christian theology, again, a sort of a vision of a fusion between a type of moral vision of the world and the acquisition and the exercise of power. So in the classical world, if you wanted the archetype of this person who exercised power well, you thought of Boethius. The image is right there. It's very clear. It's Boethius. It's Socrates. It's Plato's conception of the philosopher king. It's Aristotle teaching Alexander the Great. In the Christian version of that, the archetype is Jesus. If you want a sort of image of the proper relationship between the exercise of power and morality, think of Jesus, or think of idealistic Jesuit priests. So when you thought about the archetype, who is this person? What does he or she look like? What do they do? It was easy in the classical world. Be like Socrates. Right? Be like the Jesuits. But Machiavelli has destroyed all of that. He's eliminated all of that. Socrates can't be the model of this new type of virtue. Jesus can't be the model of this new type of thinking and action. Machiavelli needs a new account of virtue. Right? And if we think of what virtue is, just the common notion of the word virtue, virtue, right? In the classical world, virtue, right, is thought and action in consistent alignment with certain moral principles. Thought, action, in consistent alignment with certain moral principles. But that model, that archetype of virtue, of a way of thinking and acting, isn't possible for Machiavelli. He's destroyed all of it. So Machiavelli has to provide a new account of virtue. He has to provide a new account of thinking and acting, right? Because these ambitious people, what do they want? They live in an unstable world and they want things. What do you think and how do you act to get those things? And what does that person look like? What's the archetype? What's the image? The answer that Machiavelli gives is common now to us, and it changes world history. Machiavelli says, if you want the archetype for this new type of thinking and acting, this new virtue, if you want the archetype for this new thinking and acting, don't think of Socrates, don't think of Jesus. Don't think of the philosopher, don't think of the priest. Think of the artist. The artist, in its most general conception, the artist. The artist becomes the archetype for this new type of thinking and acting. The artist. Now, he's going to do this because ultimately, what these ambitious, powerful people want, they want to build regimes. They want to build political orders. They want to build companies. They want to build empires, right? And because none of these things exist by nature, politics doesn't exist by nature, market systems don't exist by nature, empires don't exist by nature. Regimes, political regimes, corporations, hedge funds, entertainment empires, right? All of these things are built by human beings. They're built by brilliant, ambitious, aggressive, acquisitive, hungry, vainglory, fame-searching fucking people. And they're all artificial, right? It's art. The art that when Machiavelli says you think about the artist, he's talking about the very first part of the term, artificial, artificial. And so Machiavelli says you got to think about the artist. The new archetype is the artist. It's not the philosopher, it's not the priest, it's not Socrates, it's not Jesus. It's the artist. Now, have a little fun here now. Now, lots of different types of arts Machiavelli could have chosen. And so of all the different types of arts Machiavelli could have chosen, he chooses the actor as the artist most valuable to be emulated. He chooses the actor most valuable as the archetype of this new type of virtue. Okay, why? Well, all right. First, actors play a role. The whole job of the actor is to play a role. The second job of the actor in playing a role is to make you believe that the role is true. And the way that the actor makes you believe that the role is true is by eliciting from you an emotional reaction, an emotional attachment, moving you some way emotionally. Actors play roles. That's their job. Their job is to make you believe in suspended reality that the role is real. And they do that by playing on your emotions, by appealing to your emotions, to your rage, to your fear, to your joy, to your vanity. So the archetype for this new type of virtue is the artist and the actor. Now, Machiavelli combines, I'm going to say this very slowly, this is one of the single most important moments in the movement of this whole story. Machiavelli combines in this sort of image of this new actor, artist, what he calls the executive, the prince. He's whispering to Lorenzo de Medici. He's whispering to powerful, ambitious, hungry, vainglorious men who want to rule countries, who want to build corporations, who want to build empires, right? He is talking to what we call the modern executive. Machiavelli invents the way in which we, in the modern corporate and political sense, use the term executive. Let me repeat. Machiavelli invents the modern way we use the term. In its corporate and political association, the word executive. In fact, for Machiavelli, he plays on the Italian, right? The Italian word for executive, right? And Machiavelli uses this throughout The Prince, is esecuzione. Esecuzione is the Italian word for the modern executive. The Italian word for what we would now call the president, the prime minister, the CEO, the head of a hedge fund, right? Machiavelli creates the modern term executive, esecuzione. And interestingly enough, esecuzione and the executive in its modern term, whether you're the president of the United States, whether you're the head of a major entertainment company, whether you're the head of a hedge fund or a corporation or a finance or a bank, right? You are the executive. And you've got to be able to do two things. You've got to execute people. You've got to be able to do very difficult things quickly. You have very difficult things, and you've got to do them quickly. And that's the origin of the modern executive. And by the way, Machiavelli's Prince, these are modern executives. Harvey Weinstein is a modern executive of a corporation. Bill Clinton was the executive of government. He was the president, the executive branch. CEOs are the executive, the chief executive officer. Right? So whether you're in politics or you're the executive of a firm or the chief executive of a firm, right? You are the embodiment of the modern Machiavellian notion of the executive, of this person who has to think and act in a certain way to acquire and exercise power to get what he wants. And what does he want? He wants fame. He wants sexual pleasure. He wants wealth. He wants glory. He wants influence. And it's no accident that the current sexual crisis revolves around three different kind of modalities of executive activity. You think about it, right? The new archetype is the artist. What type of artist? The actor. Why? Because they play roles. They make you believe the roles are real, and they make you believe the roles are real by affecting you emotionally, by manipulating the emotion, affecting you emotionally. And so now think about the executive as artists now in the contemporary context of what we're talking about. Political leaders, executives as artists. Heads of major studios, executive as artists. And it's no accident that even people who are caught up in the current crisis are actors. All right. So now we have this new idea of what this new archetype is. It's the artist, actor, executive, who is going to acquire and exercise power for the acquisition of wealth and sexual gratification and power and influence. Now, the second problem, and then we get to the end of this conversation. Okay, well, now we have the archetype. We know what this person looks like. Where the hell do you go to learn this? Where do you learn how to be a bad person? How do you learn to be a bad person but still appear good? How do you learn to be a bad person so you can acquire and take what you want while still being an actor in the way that people think you're a good person? Where the hell do you learn this? And again, Machiavelli's answer blows the world away. He says, you know what? This used to be secretly taught. This used to be secretly taught to the Homeric Greeks before the emergence of Platonic philosophy, before the emergence of Western metaphysics. This used to be taught secretly to the young aristocratic men of Homeric Greek society. All right? And Machiavelli writes, if you want to become this person, or you have a child and you want to make sure your child knows how to acquire and exercise power so he or she gets what she wants, then you send the child to Chiron the centaur. You send the child to a fictional creature that's half human, half beast, the centaur. Torso of a human, the bottom of an animal, of a horse or some sort of hoofed animal, a centaur. Half man, half beast. If you want to know how to learn this knowledge, you send it to Chiron the centaur. Now, pick this up a little bit. Why do you go to Chiron the centaur to learn? Machiavelli says, look, in order to acquire power to get what you want, you have to get in touch with the animal inside of you. You've got to get in touch with the beast, the centaur, the animal part of your nature. If you want to acquire and exercise power effectively to get what you want, to acquire what you want, you have to get in touch with the animal inside of you. You've got to get in touch with the beast. And he says, since you've got to get in touch with the beast, you've got to choose two animals. There are two animals to emulate. One is the lion, the other is the fox. Most important moment in Western world history. You have to learn how to become a lion and a fox. Now, why is this important? Just one more moment and we get to the real stuff. First, you have to learn how to become a lion, right? Now that's, the first part is obvious. You have to be ferocious. Lions are effing ferocious, right? They fight ferociously. They wage competitive combat ferociously. If you're the leader of a country and you have enemies, you have to conduct your war ferociously. If you're the head of a corporation and you've got competition, you gotta treat your competition ferociously. If you have enemies, you gotta treat them ferociously. All right? You gotta destroy them. You gotta be like Harvey Weinstein and hire as Israeli secret services to spy and intimidate and harass your enemies. Right? You got to be ferocious. You've got to threaten to destroy people and mean it. Now, that's not the worst part of the metaphor of the lion. That's common sense. Combat. If you want to acquire things, and there's a competition for those things, you better fight to win. You got to be ferocious. And by the way, you can't be a good person if you're going to be ferocious. Right? You better get rid of all that sentiment. But the most important thing about the lion is not the ferocity. It's the ferocity combined with guiltlessness. You've got to cultivate, and this is what Machiavelli meant when he said you got to learn how to be bad. It's not just that you have to learn how to be bad. You got to do ferocious things. You have got to learn how to be guiltless. You've got to learn to do ferocious, vicious, violent things. You got to learn how to rape and not feel guilt. Right? The lion is ferocious but has no guilt. The lion is ferocious and has no remorse. The lion consumes. The lion takes what it wants. So you've got to be a lion. You've got to be ferocious and have no guilt. Now, the second animal you've got to learn is a fox. Again, critically important. You need to learn how to fox for two reasons. One, the fox is clever. The fox can think quickly on its feet. The fox can process a lot of data at once, complex technical data, right? The fox can process that and it can make a decision quickly about what to do because foxes are being hunted. The metaphor of the fox is being hunted by the hounds. And the fox is moving through the forest and it's moving quickly, right? It's taking in all this data, and it's got to take in this data. It's got to contemplate. It's got to sort of calculate that data. It's got to make a decision about which way to run because its life depends on it because we're always being hunted. In Machiavelli's world, you're always hunting and being hunted. And if the fox doesn't calculate the data correctly, it dies. So you got to learn to be a fox so you can take in all this information. You can calculate all the machinations and the possibilities. You can make decisions about life and death, about profit or failure. Now, the second reason why you're a fox is because foxes are also duplicitous. And here's the key to Machiavelli. And by the way, this is why the whole thing is coming apart. They have lost this part. They've forgotten this part. This part is over for them. The fox is important because you need to be duplicitous, right? You need to be able to do horrible things, to acquire viciously what you want, to take and rape and exploit and destroy the souls and the bodies of other fucking human beings. But you've always got to appear as a good person. You always have to try to appear to be just. to be humane, to be interested in feminine causes, right? And that's the secret. And by the way, this is why Machiavelli turns most executives into sociopaths. This is why Machiavelli turns executives into sociopaths. This is the origin of the sociopathology and the psychopathology that is deeply infused in the consciousness of the modern world, and especially in modern executives. This is why Bill Clinton, this is why Harvey Weinstein, this is why these people who do what they do, but they try to look good. It's imperative that they look like they're good people. They look like they care about other people and justice and feminist issues. They're the fox. They can calculate at very sophisticated levels, and they're duplicitous. They're duplicitous. They know how to look good. They appear in the way that the vulgar people want to see them. So here we go. Why have I bored you with all of this? Machiavelli separates morality from power. Because in order to act in the way that you have to and get what you want in this world, you've got to separate morality from power. In order to do that, you've got to become an artist. You got to play a role. You got to convince people it's real, and you got to fuck with their emotions in doing it. And it's no accident that happens at the highest levels of government and corporate finance, and even at the heads of studios, and even in actors themselves. Now, where do you learn to do this? You learn to do this by becoming a lion and a fox. You become ferocious and guiltless. You learn to, and this is what they teach in the MBA schools, you learn how to think critically. And then you also learn how to be duplicitous. All right. So I've wasted an hour of your time to prepare you for this moment. I have wasted an hour of your time to prepare you for this moment. Why is all this important? And how has the last hour kind of contributed to this argument that here is the conditions of possibility of what we now are living in this material, sexual, conquest, rape culture? Here it is. All of this is important, Machiavelli argues, for one thing. Learning this new virtue, this artist, this ferocious, guiltless, duplicitous artist that acts in such a way to take what he or she wants while appearing good. All of this is necessary. All of this is in preparation for Machiavelli's transformation of the human, especially the male, of the human, but especially the male relationship to Lady Fortuna. Machiavelli fundamentally alters the Stoic conception of the human relationship between Lady Fortuna and human beings. Machiavelli fundamentally changes the relationship between human beings and Lady Fortuna. And now let's do it. Here it is. Here's the origins. Here are the modern origins of the crisis we are living through right now. So now we got to talk about Machiavelli and Machiavelli's the relationship between the would-be prince, the young Bill Clinton, the young Harvey Weinstein, the young Kevin Spacey, the young Louis C.K. Right? All of this is in preparation for these young would-be male, aristocratic, ambitious, hungry, vicious, guiltless sons of bitches who want to acquire. It's all in preparation for this, for their interaction with Lady Fortuna. Machiavelli fundamentally alters how human beings relate to Lady Fortuna. So before we get into that, let's just set up where we were. How does Machiavelli agree with Boethius about Lady Fortuna? First, let's set up the parallels, right? Because we started this discussion with Boethius' notion of Lady Fortuna. Now let's finish it with Machiavelli's, right? And so let's start by the comparisons. How does Machiavelli agree with Boethius about Lady Fortuna? First, Machiavelli agrees that Lady Fortuna is still a goddess. Lady Fortuna is still a goddess, and she's a feminine goddess. and Lady Fortuna is still a woman. And this is critical. Hold on. So Machiavelli agrees with Boethius that Lady Fortuna is a woman and that she's a goddess. She's a cosmic force. He also agrees with Boethius that Lady Fortuna, this woman, this goddess, this cosmic force, Lady Fortuna, has the good things powerful men want. So Machiavelli fundamentally agrees with Boethius that Lady Fortuna is a goddess, she's a woman, and she has the things men want. She has the power, she has the wealth, she has the territory, the land, the oil, the gold, the glory. She's got it. She's got the things men want. Now, here's where world history changes. How does Machiavelli alter the human relationship to Lady Fortuna? And how does that relate to the era of acquisition and sexual assault we are now living? How? Here it is. In chapter 25 of Machiavelli's Prince, here it is. It is not unknown to me, Machiavelli writes, chapter 25 of the Prince. It is not unknown to me that many have held and hold the opinion that worldly things, the things we want, it is not unknown to me, he writes, that many have written, that have held and held the opinion that the worldly things humans want, that men want, are so governed by fortune, owned by fortune, governed by fortune, that men cannot correct them with their prudence. Indeed, that they have no remedy at all. And on account of this, they might judge that one need not to sweat much over things, but let oneself be governed by fortune. So he's talking directly to Boethius. I have heard, Machiavelli says, I have read, he says. What he means is not unknown to me. So I have read, like from Boethius, that people like Boethius hold the opinion that worldly things are governed by fortune, and that men cannot correct them with their prudence, and therefore should just leave it alone. So he's rejecting the Stoic notion of the human relationship to fortune. And he goes on. Nonetheless, he says, so that our free will not be eliminated, I judge that it might be true that fortune is arbiter, that Lady Fortuna is arbiter of half our actions, but also that she leaves the other half or close to it for us to govern. Okay. In this beautiful poetic metaphor of Lady Fortuna and their human relationship, Machiavelli says, she's a woman. She's out there in the cosmos, but she's not beyond our grasp. Lady Fortuna is not beyond our grasp. And not only is Lady Fortuna not beyond our grasp, we can do things to sort of seduce and ultimately conquer Lady Fortuna. Now, this changes world history. Cannot exaggerate how profound this is. And Machiavelli changes the human, especially the male relationship to Lady Fortuna in two ways. Lady Fortuna is not beyond our grasp. Lady Fortuna is something we can engage and possibly even control and direct. Now, how does he do this? How does he affect this fundamental transformation of how humans think about and relate to Lady Fortuna? Here we go. First, Machiavelli treats Lady Fortuna as a metaphor for nature. The first thing that Machiavelli does is he says, stop thinking about Lady Fortuna in some abstract way in the cosmos, spinning some wheel, and you don't see her, you can't talk to her, you have no idea. Stop thinking of Lady Fortuna in that abstract, unseen, cosmic way. First thing you need to do, Machiavelli says, and by the way, this begins the modern era of the obsession of the conquest of nature. This begins the modern era of the human obsession with the conquest and exploitation of nature for power. Machiavelli says, stop thinking about Lady Fortuna as some abstract, unreachable thing. Think of Lady Fortuna as nature. Think of Lady Fortuna as nature. Right? Nature has all the things you want. The oil is in the ground. The gold is in the mountain. The diamonds are in the ground. The land is over in the new world. All the things that people want, especially the material things, the oil, the land, the wealth, the diamonds, the gold, the bodies of other fucking human beings. All those things, all those material things that you want to acquire, that become potentially infinite resources of power, which allow you to acquire more. Those things aren't far away, and you don't have to wait for Lady Fortuna to give them to you. Lady Fortuna's nature. The gold is in the mountains. The oil is in the ground. The diamonds, the timber, the fish, right? All that stuff that you want to acquire, and to, from that acquisition, create wealth, and from that wealth, create more power, and ultimately glory. It's all right here. It's all around you. It's surrounding you. It's here. It's in nature. Are you ambitious and courageous and virile enough to go take it? It's out there. And by the way, this is part and parcel with the whole energy of European colonialism. Right? The new world is out there. The gold, the Aztec gold is in the new world. After World War II, the oil's in the Middle East. The resources for the Dutch are in India, Central Africa. Everything powerful, virile, ambitious men want to acquire is here. The only question is, do you have the guts and the virility and the boldness and the aggressiveness to go and take it? Take it from Lady Fortuna as nature. Build a boat, get on that damn boat, sail across the sea, and take the land. And in taking the land, acquire wealth and glory. All the things you want are here. Do you have the guts? And are you cold and ferocious and guiltless enough to go and take it? Now, the second way, and these both are connected, speaks now directly to the whole point of this show. It's not just that Lady Fortuna becomes a metaphor for nature, and now humans can engage in nature. Now we can conquer nature, we can set upon nature, we can exploit nature for wealth. It's also, Machiavelli then shifts. Once he's done talking about Lady Fortuna as nature, he says, well, now that I'm done talking about Lady Fortuna as nature, let me just remind you, and here is some Renaissance misogyny, very, very painful things right now. He says, in this sort of Renaissance misogyny, this male, virile, aristocratic, ferocious, guiltless, acquisitive misogyny, he says, Lady Fortuna is still a woman. After all, at the end of the day, she's still a woman. And like all women, Machiavelli writes, again, Renaissance misogyny. Here's the origin of Harvey Weinstein. Here's the origin of Bill Clinton. Here's the origin of Louis C.K. Here's the driving energy behind this. Machiavelli says, whispering to these powerful men, whispering to these would-be princes, whispering to these would-be conquerors. Lady Fortuna is still a woman. And like all women, she wants to be seduced. She wants to be erotically and physically seduced. She wants to be chased. She wants to be hunted by these young, ambitious, ferocious, guiltless men. She wants to be chased. She's still a woman. And like we said earlier, right? Lady Fortuna is still a woman. She still has all the things we want in many ways, symbolically, right? All these things, Lady Fortune still has them. She still has the things we want. And she knows she has the things we want. And she knows we're coming after them. And so Machiavelli says, what powerful executives do, what people do who have acquired a certain level of wealth and power and fame. What people do, what men do who have acquired a certain level of wealth and status and power and glory. What these men do is go on this extraordinary quest to seduce Lady Fortuna. To seduce the body and the soul of Lady Fortuna. And the great seduction between these would-be executives and Lady Fortuna takes place. And it's a game. It's an erotic game. It's a physical game. It's a game of power. It's a game of influence and submission and domination. And Machiavelli argues, Lady Fortuna likes this. This is the misogyny at its origin. Right? Lady Fortuna is a woman. She wants to be seduced by young, virile, powerful, ambitious men. But she's not going to, she's not going to be easy. She's going to play hard to get, which is, by the way, a metaphor for this idea that all great undertakings are fraught with challenges, are fraught with failures, are fraught with difficulty. But the seduction, the quest goes on. And here is where we are. Here's where we are. Machiavelli says, at some point, the game is going on between the prince and Lady Fortuna. And you're pushing and you're acquiring and you're trying to take and you're moving towards, you're setting on. And Lady Fortuna is playing hard to get and playing hard to get. And at some point, Machiavelli says, at some point, if you really want it, and he's talking about the prince's relationship to Lady Fortuna, the feminized body and soul of now this woman. He says, if you really want it, then at some point you just have to take it, right? At some point you just have to cuff and maul Lady Fortuna, right? And this is extraordinary. Machiavelli says, with relationship to the prince and Lady Fortuna, at some point, if you want it badly enough, if you're not getting what you want, you simply cuff and maul Lady Fortuna. You physically take and dominate and extract from Lady Fortuna what you want. You rape Lady Fortuna. And Machiavelli writes, towards the end of chapter 25, I judge this indeed. I judge this indeed, he says, and he's talking to Lorenzo de Medici. He's talking to these would-be executives, power brokers, powerful, wealthy, famous, influential men. I judge this indeed, and it is better to be impetuous than cautious. It's better to be aggressive than cautious. Because Fortune is a woman. And it is necessary, here we go, and it is necessary if one wants to hold her down If one wants, it is necessary to hold her down and to beat her and to cuff her. So at the end of the day, wealth, power, fame is license to rape Lady Fortuna. And not just rape Lady Fortuna, but in the misogyny, all of it, that's what women want. And this sort of dysfunction becomes the origin. This is suffused through the entire culture of power and wealth and fame, and the male relationship to Lady Fortuna, and the male relationship to the bodies and the souls of actual women. I judge this, that it is better to be aggressive than cautious, because Fortune is a woman, and it is necessary, if one wants her, to hold her down, to beat her, and cuff her. And we will finish today, before we take some questions, we will finish today with Donald Trump's speech from Access Hollywood. Donald Trump, quote, "I moved on her. I did try to fuck her. I moved on her like a bitch. I just start kissing them. I don't even wait. When you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything." Machiavelli's notion of the prince's relationship to Lady Fortuna, Donald Trump and Harvey Weinstein. They begin and end in the same place. So that's it. Been kind of our longest episode, pretty intense. Thank you for your patience. We can go ahead and take some questions, or maybe we just go have a beer, for God's sake. We're running long, but if there's questions, I'm happy to take them. Oh, so many. Let's see. So women have all the great things to start with. Right? Hi, Emma. That's what this is saying. It's actually defining men as, yeah, in a very interesting sort of codependency. That's right. If you look at both the classical and modern version of the mythos of Lady Fortuna, that's right. That in a way, the feminine is the source of all of real power, ultimately, and the source of everything that we want. So yeah, that's right. I guess the irony of it is that the mythos of Lady Fortuna is a very empowering thing. Absolutely. Yeah, and very interesting, Joshua. Several women with PTSD because of this mentality. That's brilliant. And that's terrifying. That's actually heartbreaking. And it's right? If you think what PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, right? And when you think about it, fuck, that's amazing. Actually, it's heartbreaking, but it's correct. Even if you think about the more immediate ways in which PTSD is known to us, right? Post-traumatic stress disorder, it's a disorder that comes from combat. It's a disorder that comes from war, right? From conditions, from living and acting and being in conditions that are extraordinarily unstable, extraordinarily violent, and extraordinarily terrifying. And you just hope you live through it. And actually the analogy between a sort of a PTSD deriving from the immediate sort of combat field, and it's Veterans Day today, is applicable to what we're talking about. It's applicable too because for Machiavelli, everything's war. Machiavelli's metaphor of the lion and the fox is meant to symbolize deeply that for very powerful, ambitious, aristocratic, aggressive people, right, life is combat, right? The lion and the fox are a metaphor for you are either hunting or you are being hunted. In fact, for Machiavelli, it's the same thing. If you're the leader of a country, if you're Bill Clinton and you're the executive of a country, or you're Harvey Weinstein and you're the executive of a major entertainment firm worth hundreds of millions of dollars, your life is it's technically combat, right? You are this ferocious, guiltless lion, and you are this fox. And so life is a perpetual hunting and being hunted. That's your reality. Life is a perpetual, unending process of hunting and being hunted, right? And so you have to equip yourself with both of these perspectives to live in that world effectively. That's what Machiavelli means. The world is anarchic. It's very dangerous. It's terrifying. And you want things. So you've got to be a ferocious, guiltless, cunning, duplicitous lion and fox. So you got to be hunting, and you're always hunted. Now your observation is actually correct, because the people who are in this field of combat with these executives, right, their experience with these people is traumatic, right? They are in a battlefield. If you're working in Hollywood, if you're an intern during the Kennedy administration, or you're an intern during the Clinton administration, or you're working in Hollywood, right? You are in a field of combat. You are being hunted, right? And you are being hunted by very ferocious and sort of calculating and guiltless and duplicitous people. Absolutely. The whole territory is combat. Corporate finance, combat, right? Politics, combat. The entertainment industry, combat. I mean, look at what's happening. This explosion of stories that are coming out, right? And you look at the whole phenomenon with the hashtag Me Too, right? Over the last couple of weeks, this absolutely culture, this heartbreaking cultural phenomenon, hashtag Me Too, and the tens of millions of hashtag Me Too. Those are all stories of people who have survived the fucking combat of these executives living as these ferocious, guiltless, cunning, duplicitous fucking people. And the impact this is having on other people is devastating. It's traumatic. It's absolutely, it's traumatic to one's mind. It's traumatic to one's soul. It's traumatic to one's body. It's traumatic to one's sense of self-esteem. Yeah, it's a combat zone. We have created hyper-capitalistic, late modern economic and financial and professional and political environments as warfare for your body and your mind. Absolutely. This whole thing is a type of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Absolutely. Without a doubt. Yeah, that breaks my heart. Breaks my heart. All right. Okay, so look, it's been great to see all of you. This went very long. An hour and 30 minutes is often too long. I will try to keep them shorter. Thank you so much for staying and participating. I hope it was useful. I will remind you that we have the Dungey State University Patreon account. So if you find these sorts of episodes useful, if the information is useful, if we can take this information and do important things with it, I encourage you to support the Patreon. If not, don't worry. Everything will always remain free. But it is there, and if you want to participate and support, I would be greatly appreciative. So much love to everybody, to my family, friends, and students who have been and currently are members of the military. A reverent thank you for your service, and a profound love for you, profound love for everybody. Take care, and we'll see you this time next week. Bye-bye. I love to watch the hearts go. So beautiful. You guys are so fabulous. Bye-bye.